Has anyone ever asked you, where is your home? Or even better yet, where are you from? Have you ever been very confused or conflicted by answering that question? Did you not know what to say? Did you maybe have more than one place in mind? Did you feel like there was a whole story waiting to spiel blurb out and you felt like you didn't have enough time to tell it, so you just kind of went like that, I lived here, I lived here, I lived here, and I moved here, and then I went to school here, and now I'm here. Do you feel like you have to explain yourself every time you tell your life story? Do you? Well, I want you to know that you're not alone, and hopefully I'm not alone too, because I feel like my life has been weird as heck. But here I am, and I want to tell you guys more about how I got here and the whole journey to it. Welcome back to this highly dormant channel that has not been very active for a very long time. That is what dormant means. So, it has officially been 4 months, or almost 4 months, since I moved back to Korea, and I decided that I would give this YouTube thing another go after a little while of tumbling and fumbling and wandering, all the craziness that I've been experiencing after quitting my job and moving back here and having completely no idea what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life. And this time I really wanted to start off by kind of letting you guys know who I am, and especially the parts of my life and my background that people always seem to find very interesting. And then I kind of realized that it is a little bit interesting because it's a very different experience from what most people experience, in that I have not lived in my home country or the country where I was born and am a national citizen of for over 10 years. As unique as it is, I'm also sure that there are other people like me out there who have had similar experiences, or maybe just don't feel quite at home in a place where you're supposed to call home, or where your family lives, or where you're a passport citizen of. So all of these questions that I feel like I've just been wrestling with a lot, and questions that not fully answer but definitely ponder and talk to other people about and really get a firmer grasp of my identity and my cultural upbringing and all of those fun things. I think is pretty fun, but I'm a nerd, so don't take my word for it. I go off on a lot of tangents. Also, really random, this is a total tangent, but I don't usually do my hair like this. This is like a completely new thing that I'm trying. These are called curtain bangs. It's like a new trend on social media. I fall into these traps very easily. I literally just saw this girl cutting her own curtain bangs, so I decided to go like this. Not even hair cutting scissors, just like regular old scissors. Yeah, so I tried to style it, and it really didn't turn out quite the way I expected. I feel like this kind of reminds me more of 60s Beatles hippie hairstyle than what the curtain bang look is actually supposed to look like. I don't know how she does it. Like, other girls make it look really cool. I look like I'm in the Beatles. That is why I don't do hair tutorials or makeup tutorials, usually, because I'm not very good at them. But I guess that sort of explains why I want to go in this other direction. I do think that there's a lot more about my life than what you guys see on my social media, like my hair and makeup. A lot of things I think people would like to know. People who can relate to my experience will feel really like there is someone out there who has lived this weird and strange life. Or maybe this is completely new for you and it's just really different and interesting to hear about, which is, I mean, that's cool too. Now, I do want to make specific videos for each country that I lived in, sharing my unique experiences there, but for this video, I do want to do a kind of general overview of my life, as well as dive deeper into what it really means to live as an international, not just an international student, but now as I've graduated and I'm no longer a student, as scary as that is, as difficult and kind of boring as it is that I did not expect it to be. Wow, language. So, let's just jump right into it. That was really awkward. I'm gonna do that again. Let's jump into it. Let's get right into it. Shall we? I'm not gonna do any more transitions or intros, just saying. This is not for me. So, first things first. I was born in Seoul, South Korea. So there's me as a little baby. And I was actually raised by my grandparents for 3 years while my parents were working really hard. And I didn't really have a lot of overseas experience besides traveling, and I didn't really speak English either. I mean, I took English classes like everybody else, but I never had to speak English with anyone. My first language was Korean, and I remember being very sad and very scared to leave my friends when my parents all of a sudden decided to uproot us, me and my mom, and move to Canada, Vancouver specifically. This was my first elementary school. This was where I went to school for 2 years. It was definitely a big transition because I was learning English for the first time. I didn't know anything or anyone. At that point, I didn't really feel a lot of differences or discrimination or anything like that. I was just kind of trying to fit in, trying to get along. I think at that point, I didn't really realize that I was different from everybody else. The neighborhood where I lived for pretty much all my life in Canada was predominantly white. I was one of the only Koreans, or one of the only Asians usually. Most of my friends ended up being white. To me, that was completely fine. Got invited to their houses and got to have sleepovers, listen to fun new music. I learned Avril Lavigne and Taylor Swift. So the first few years, it was good. This was my second elementary school. Now, this school was maybe a little bit bigger than my old one, but it was still predominantly white, and I was still pretty much a minority. I think by that point, I had reached an age where, how does one say this? I was starting to feel like, oh, I want to fit in, I want to be cool and hang out with the popular kids. I somehow got it into my mind that maybe because I had become friends with people who are a little more on the quiet side, or people who weren't, I guess, considered popular, I personally felt like I also couldn't really join in that crowd. I don't think it was very consciously a race thing or like a cultural thing, but I did remember one of the most popular girls in my class. Her name was Nicole. I don't think she'll ever see this video. I hope not. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, and I thought she was very pretty, and I was like, wow, this is what it takes to be a popular girl in Canada. This is what it takes to be cool and to be liked by all the boys. So when I got to this new school, I really wanted that, but at the same time, I already had this idea in my head that that wasn't ever going to be a possibility for me. So I actually started out making friends with a lot of the Persian kids. There was a big Persian population in Vancouver as well. I just find them very nice and easy to get along with. Honestly, I think I felt comfortable because I think I had a fear of getting to know really these other kids. My second school was a little bit well off in a nicer neighborhood. I think I found that a little bit more challenging. So fun fact, I never lived in a house until I was in high school. I always lived in apartments because that's just what you do in Korea. Korea is not a very big country. Whether you're rich or whether you're poor, the majority of the population tends to live in apartments, so you don't really feel like left out of anything. In Vancouver, all my friends lived in houses, and some of them were like really nice, big houses. I was the only one who living in this really tiny apartment with a 1-bedroom that sometimes I had to share with my mom. So I didn't really want to invite friends to my house. Didn't like to speak Korean in front of them with my mom. I got really embarrassed. I also didn't like to show my lunches, the whole like lunchbox story. It's very cliched now, but it is a thing. It was a thing for me. At this new school, I was starting to feel like, oh, I really couldn't join in with the popular kids. This was really the point in my life where I was switching up a lot of friend groups and really going through different phases, trying to figure out where I belonged. I don't know if this is just my experience, but it really felt like the only boys who had ever liked me were other Korean boys, like from church. To me, like generally church boys were usually like, no thanks. And there weren't really a lot of Korean boys at school, and just back then, I wasn't very attracted to Korean boys. I do think now, looking back, the reason was that I had this sort of pride and I really did want to be liked by a white boy, just to kind of prove to myself, oh yeah, I can be liked in this way, and that people do find me attractive, but it just never happened. So I think that left a lot of insecurities. I also had crushes, mind you, I had many crushes. Never really told any of them that I liked them. In my mind, that wasn't really a possibility for me either. Just like it had not been with the cool kids, it just seemed like no boy at school would ever like me. I could go so much deeper into that, but I won't go there right now because I want to move on to the next part of my life, where I went to an international private school in a city in the desert. Part 3 of my life, when I was uprooted once again and my dad was like, surprise, you're moving to Abu Dhabi with me. Yeah, it was not a fun time. I remember distinctly crying on my way to the airport, realizing I was not going to be able to go to high school with my friends that I'd grown up with, realizing I was going to have to adjust to a new country again and go through that entire process that hadn't really been as painful the first time, but this time it was like, I had a greater consciousness. This was a 12-year-old brain, not a 7-year-old brain. But I got there. I got to Abu Dhabi, and I was with my dad. And, around that time was when my parents got divorced. It was definitely, I would say, a very, very different experience, one that I may not ever replicate anywhere else. I do think the culture in the UAE is very specific. The expat culture, the environment where the natives are a minority, and everyone is just this cultural hub of so many different nationalities, religions, and even being a Christian there, that's a whole other experience I can talk about. I think there are too many layers to include in this one video that's already getting too long. So, this was me in middle school. This is my school picture from 8th grade, I believe. There is me with my middle school makeup, thinking that I was the queen of makeup. Obviously, I was not. Obviously, we had to wear uniforms, and they were not very nice looking. I remember me and my friends getting the skirts hemmed so that we could wear them shorter, even though we were not supposed to. We were supposed to wear them to our knees. I remember feeling there sometimes the most fun I think I ever had in life, and also sometimes the most misery. I do think a lot of insecurities stemmed there. I gained a lot of weight when I was in middle school. Maybe it was just really not having a lot of restrictions from my dad, eating out all the time, ordering in, eating a lot of junk food, ton of junk food. Things about my body image and my weight started to kind of kick in, and I started really noticing the way I looked and not really liking the way I looked, comparing myself a lot to other girls. I'll say it was a dark time in my life. I hear this from a lot of people, but I do genuinely think middle school was a dark time for me, where I really didn't have any sense of security about myself. I was really just kind of following my friends who seemed so much more older, more mature than me, could be very attractive in the eyes of the opposite gender. This wasn't entirely true, but I did feel as a Korean and as an Asian, I never really felt like I was a minority or felt that I was so different from other people that I just couldn't fit in. I think because there were just so many different races and ethnicities and cultures, it was pretty difficult to feel so different from everyone else. All my friends were from different places. I made friends from South Africa, I made friends from Indonesia and Thailand, from Europe. Met a guy who was a prince, like an actual prince. And I do think that international experience was really valuable, even though I did not really apply it to my next stage, which was going back to Canada. Back then, I didn't have this concept in my mind that there could be international schools in Korea. I just thought automatically, oh, if I'm going back to Korea, I'm going to a Korean school. And I couldn't do that. I knew that language-wise and culturally, I would never be able to. When my dad decided that he was going to go back to Korea, I was like, bring me back to Canada, which is the next part in my life. Part 4, I think? Korea, Canada. Part 4.